She saved a millionaire's life and tried to disappear without telling him, but he followed her and saw her feeding triplets. A great love story for my beautiful family. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's start the story together. Some people say you can hear death coming, that it whistles through the rain, hisses in the lightning, screams in the thunder. But Gina Seeley heard something else that stormy night, a man's muffled cry from inside a burning car. The windshield wipers could barely keep up with the downpour. Rain hammered against her old sedan like angry fists, and the road ahead disappeared into sheets of water that reflected her headlights back at her. Gina's hands ached from gripping the steering wheel, her shoulders tight from a double shift at the diner. The smell of grease and coffee still clung to her uniform, and all she wanted was to collapse into bed. Then she saw it, a luxury vehicle, sleek, dark, expensive, hydroplaned across the center line and spun like a terrible dancer across the wet asphalt. Time seemed to slow as the car left the road, sailed through the air, and slammed into an oak tree with a sound that made Gina's stomach turn. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and then, almost immediately, orange flames began licking up from the hood. "No, no, no," Gina whispered, her foot already hitting the brake. Every logical part of her brain screamed at her to keep driving. "Call for help, yes, but don't stop. Don't get involved. You're alone on a dark road in a storm. You don't know who's in that car. You don't know what you're walking into." But Gina Seeley had never been good at listening to logic when someone needed help. She pulled onto the shoulder, her tires sliding in the mud. The moment she stepped out of her car, the rain attacked her, soaking through her uniform in seconds. The wind tried to push her back, but she ran toward the wreck, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles. The heat from the fire hit her face before she reached the car. Flames danced across the crumpled hood, growing stronger, hungrier. Through the spider-webbed window she could see him, a man slumped over the steering wheel, unconscious, blood trickling down his temple. "Hey!" Gina shouted, banging on the window. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. The man didn't move. The fire spread faster, crawling toward the interior. Smoke began filling the cabin. Gina ran back to her car, grabbed the tire iron from her trunk, and returned to the wreck. She swung it with everything she had, and the driver's side window exploded inward. Her hands shook as she reached through the broken glass, cutting her palm on a jagged edge. She didn't feel it. She couldn't feel anything except the desperate need to get this man out before the car became his coffin. "Come on," she grunted, releasing his seatbelt and grabbing him under the arms. He was heavy, dead weight, his head lolling against her shoulder. "Come on, stay with me." Gina pulled with strength she didn't know she had, dragging him through the window, across the wet ground, away from the burning vehicle. Her back screamed in protest. Her lungs burned from the smoke. But she didn't stop until they were a safe distance away. She laid him on his back in the mud and rain. His lips were blue. His chest wasn't moving. "No," Gina said firmly, as if she could command death itself to back off. "Nee, you don't get to die. Not tonight. Not on me." She tilted his head back, checked his airway, and began chest compressions. She'd learned CPR years ago, never thinking she'd actually use it. Her hands pressed against his sternum, counting rhythms in her head, ignoring the rain that blinded her, ignoring everything except the task in front of her. "Come on," she said between compressions. "Breathe. Damn you, breathe." She pinched his nose, sealed her mouth over his, and breathed life into him. Once, twice, back to compressions. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, but she refused to stop. Behind her, the car exploded with a roar that shook the ground, sending flames shooting into the dark sky. "Breathe," Gina shouted, pumping his chest harder, and then a gasp. A wet, choking gasp as the man's body convulsed and he sucked in air. His eyes flew open, wild and confused, staring up at the rain and the woman hovering over him. "You're okay," Gina said, her voice shaking with relief. "You're going to be okay. Just keep breathing. Help is coming." In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone must have called emergency services. The man tried to speak, but only a raspy cough came out. His hand reached up, fingers brushing against Gina's arm, as if trying to hold on to the anchor that had pulled him back from the dark. She stayed with him until she saw the flash of red and blue lights approaching. Then quietly, she stood and backed away into the shadows. "Wait," the man rasped, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Who?" But Gina was already gone, melting into the darkness before the paramedics arrived. She ran to her car, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She didn't know why she ran. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the hard-earned knowledge that getting involved with people like him, people who drove cars that cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, only ever brought pain. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Gina drove home through the storm, her clothes soaked, her body shaking with delayed shock. She didn't think about the man's face. She didn't let herself wonder if he'd be all right. She'd done what anyone would do, what anyone should do, and now it was over. She parked outside her apartment building, a tired structure in the Southridge neighborhood where paint peeled from the walls and doors didn't quite close right. Home, such as it was. Her phone buzzed as she climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit. Delphine's name flashed on the screen. Her best friend since childhood, the sister she'd chosen, the one person in the world who knew all her secrets. Gina smiled and answered. "Del, it's late. You should be—" "Gina." Delphine's voice was wrong, tight, scared, barely controlled. "Something's happening. The babies, they said babies. Something's wrong. I'm at Mercy General and they're— Oh God, Gina, I'm so scared." The world tilted. "I'm coming," Gina said, already turning around, already running back down the stairs. "I'm coming right now. Hold on, Del. Just hold on." She drove through the rain again, but this time she barely saw the road. Her best friend needed her. Delphine, who'd been pregnant for months, glowing with joy at the prospect of motherhood, even though the father had abandoned her the moment he found out. Delphine, who'd been so careful, so prepared, so ready to love the life growing inside her. Gina burst through the emergency room doors, still soaked from the storm, looking wild and desperate. "Delphine Bouchard," what she gasped to the nurse at the desk. "She's having a baby. She called me." "Where is she?" The nurse's expression shifted, something Gina would later recognize as pity. "Fourth floor, maternity ward." But Gina didn't wait for the rest. She sprinted to the elevator, jabbed the button repeatedly, rode up in agonizing silence. The maternity ward was too quiet. That was the first thing she noticed. Hospitals are never quiet, but this hallway felt like death itself was holding its breath. A doctor stood outside one of the rooms, speaking quietly to a nurse. When he saw Gina approaching, something in his face made her legs go weak. "Delphine Bouchard," Gina said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "I'm her emergency contact. I'm so sorry," the doctor said, and those 3 words shattered Gina's world. She hemorrhaged during the delivery. "We did everything we could," but the rest of his words disappeared into white noise. Gina's vision blurred. Her legs gave out and she caught herself against the wall, shaking her head because if she shook it hard enough, maybe reality would rearrange itself into something bearable. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not. She was fine. She was fine this morning. We talked about baby names. The babies survived," the doctor said quietly. 3 healthy girls, triplets. She held them before he stopped, cleared his throat. "She asked for you. We need to discuss arrangements for the infants. 3 babies, no mother." And somewhere in that quiet room, her best friend lay beneath a white sheet, gone from this world after only getting to hold her daughters once. Gina pushed past the doctor and into the room. 3 small bassinets lined the wall, each containing a tiny, wrinkled miracle wrapped in hospital blankets. They were crying, thin, helpless little wails that cut straight through Gina's shock and pierced her heart, but she couldn't look at them yet. First, she had to see Delphine. Her friend lay in the hospital bed, peaceful in a way that was worse than any violence. She looked like she was sleeping. Like any moment her eyes would open, and she'd laugh at Gina for making such a fuss. But they'd covered her with a sheet up to her shoulders, and Gina knew. "She knew, Del," Gina whispered, taking her friend's still warm hand. "I'm here." I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. I'm sorry. A nurse approached quietly. She was conscious for a few minutes after the delivery. She asked us to give you this. The nurse handed Gina a piece of paper, hospital stationery, with shaky handwriting scrawled across it. Delphine's handwriting. Gina, I know I won't make it. I can feel it. Please, please don't let them separate my girls. Don't let strangers take them. You're the only family I have, the only one I trust. Promise me you'll raise them as your own. Promise me. I love you. Tell them I loved them. Tell them every day. Udell. The paper trembled in Gina's hands. Behind her, the three babies continued their chorus of cries, unknowingly calling for a mother who would never answer. Gina looked at the bassinets, then at her friend's peaceful face, then back at the three tiny lives that had just entered a world that had already failed them. She made a decision that would change everything. I'll take them, Gina said, her voice stronger than she felt. The babies. I'll take them. I'll raise them. The nurse's expression shifted to concern. That's very noble, but you should understand what you're taking on. 3 infants require— I know what they require, Gina interrupted, and I'm taking them. She was my sister in every way that matters. These babies are mine now, the nurse nodded slowly. There will be paperwork, lots of it, and social services will need to approve whatever it takes, Gina said. She walked to the bassinets and looked down at 3 scrunched faces, red from crying, so small and helpless and already marked by loss. Whatever it takes. She reached down and picked up the first baby, the one whose wristband read, Baby Girl Bouchard A. The crying stopped immediately as the infant settled against Gina's chest, instinctively seeking warmth and comfort. Hello, Annabelle, Gina whispered, remembering the name Delphine had chosen. I've got you. I promise I've got all of you. The second baby, Mirabelle, was next, then Isabel. 3 babies in one night, going home with the woman who'd started the evening, saving a stranger from fire, and ended it becoming a mother to 3 children who weren't hers by blood, but were hers by promise, by love, by the kind of bond that transcends biology. As Gina held the triplets, trying to soothe all 3 at once with soft words and gentle rocking, she didn't know that across the city, the man she'd saved was waking up in a private hospital room. She didn't know he was demanding to know who rescued him. She didn't know he'd spend weeks obsessing over finding her, convinced she was somehow his destiny. She didn't know that in trying to disappear from one life, she'd set in motion a collision course with another. All she knew was that she'd made a promise to a dead woman. And Gina Seeley never broke her promises, even if it killed her. Chapter 2. A Vow in Blood and Tears. The fluorescent lights in the hospital social services office hummed like dying bees. Gina sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair with 3 car seats balanced around her feet, each containing a sleeping infant who'd mercifully exhausted themselves crying. She'd been waiting for over an hour, and every minute felt like sandpaper against her already raw nerves. The woman who finally entered looked like she'd been carved from granite and disappointment. Tall, thin, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to pull at her scalp. She carried a thick manila folder and an expression that suggested she'd seen every bad decision humanity had to offer. Miss Seeley, the woman said, settling behind her desk without offering a handshake. I'm Opal Fentress, the social worker assigned to the Bouchard case. I understand you've expressed interest in taking custody of the deceased's children. They're not the deceased's children, Gina said, her voice sharper than she intended. Their mother's name was Delphine, and I'm not interested in taking custody. I am taking custody. Opal's eyebrow arched slightly. I admire your conviction, Miss Seeley, but the reality is far more complex than you seem to understand. 3 infants require extensive resources, financial stability, proper housing, time. Do you have any of those things? Gina's jaw tightened. I have enough. Do you? Opal opened the folder and began reading without looking up. You work at the Riverside Diner. You rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Southridge. Your car is over a decade old. You have no family support system, no partner, no savings to speak of. She looked up then, her gaze clinical and cold. You barely have enough to support yourself. How exactly do you plan to care for 3 infants? Every word landed like a punch, but Gina refused to flinch. She'd known this was coming. She'd spent the entire night holding Delphine's daughters, whispering promises to them while they slept. And she'd known that someone like Opal Fentress would try to take them away. Delphine wanted me to have them, Gina said quietly. She made me promise. I have her note. A note written by a dying woman in distress doesn't constitute a legal document, Opal interrupted. What matters is what's best for these children. They deserve stability, a proper home, parents who can provide for them. They deserve to stay together, Gina shot back, leaning forward. And they deserve someone who loved their mother, someone who'll tell them stories about her, someone who'll make sure they know they were wanted. You want to split them up? Send them to strangers? These girls have already lost their mother. Don't make them lose each other too. Something flickered across Opal's face, maybe respect, maybe annoyance. The state prefers to place children together when possible, but Miss Seeley, be realistic. 3 infants, 1 woman with minimal income and no experience with children. The statistics aren't in your favor. I don't care about statistics, Gina said. I care about keeping my promise. Opal studied her for a long moment, then sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 difficult decisions. The process will take time. Background checks, home visits, financial assessments. And even then, you'll need to prove you can handle this. 1 misstep, 1 sign that you're overwhelmed, and I will recommend foster placement. Do you understand? I understand, Gina said, though the threat made her stomach turn. What do I need to do? First, sign these temporary custody papers. They'll give you guardianship for the next month while we complete the investigation. During that time, I'll be monitoring the situation closely. Opal slid a stack of papers across the desk. I suggest you use this month to reconsider your decision. There's no shame in admitting you're not equipped for this. Gina picked up the pen and began signing without hesitation. I'm not reconsidering anything. By the time Gina left the hospital with 3 infants strapped into car seats that had been donated by the hospital, dawn was breaking over the city. She drove through empty streets, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, reality finally crashing down on her. She'd just become a mother to triplets. She had no idea what she was doing. Her apartment looked even smaller than she remembered. The 1-bedroom unit had seemed adequate for a single woman working long hours, a place to sleep and not much else. But now, staring at the cramped space, Gina's chest tightened with panic. Where would the babies sleep? Where would she put their things? How was she supposed to take care of 3 infants in a place barely big enough for 1 adult? 1 thing at a time, Gina whispered to herself, carrying the first car seat inside, then the second, then the third. She set them in the middle of her small living room and sank onto the couch, staring at the 3 tiny faces. Annabelle yawned. Mirabelle's little fist escaped her blanket and waved in the air. Isabel slept peacefully, her rosebud mouth making tiny sucking motions. Okay, Gina said to them. Okay, we can do this. We're going to figure this out together. The first challenge hit within an hour. All 3 babies woke up crying. Not gentle fussing, full-throated wails that filled the small apartment and probably disturbed every neighbor within 3 walls. Gina picked up Annabelle first, trying to soothe her while the other 2 screamed. She'd watched Delphine prepare for motherhood, had listened to all her research about feeding schedules and sleep patterns. But theory and practice were brutally different. She managed to prepare a bottle with 1 hand while holding Annabelle with the other, then sat on the couch trying to feed 1 baby while the other 2 cried. The moment Annabelle finished, Mirabelle needed changing. By the time Mirabelle was fed, Isabel had worked herself into hysterics. It took over 2 hours to get all 3 babies fed, changed, and calm. By the time they were all sleeping again, Gina's arms ached, her back throbbed, and she wanted to cry herself. She couldn't. She didn't have time. Instead, she called her manager at the diner. Dale, it's Gina. I need to talk to you about my schedule. By the end of that conversation, she'd arranged to keep her day shifts, but needed to find childcare. Then she called the office building, where she'd occasionally picked up evening cleaning work. By the time she hung up, she'd committed to 5 nights a week, cleaning after the office workers went home. 2 jobs. 3 babies. 1 woman running on fumes and determination. The next few days passed in a blur of feeding, changing, soothing, and sleeping in 20-minute increments whenever the triplets allowed it. Gina's world shrank to the size of her apartment. She learned to distinguish the baby's different cries, Annabelle's demanding wail, Mirabelle's escalating whimper, Isabel's quiet distress that was somehow worse than the others because it was so resigned. She learned to change diapers in the dark, to prepare bottles with her eyes closed, to function on coffee and willpower alone. Her body ached constantly. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. But every time she looked at those 3 small faces, she remembered Delphine's handwriting on that hospital paper. "Promise me you'll raise them as your own." "I promise," Gina whispered to the sleeping babies every night. "I promise, Del. I won't let you down." Opal Fentress made her first home visit on a morning when Gina had gotten exactly 90 minutes of sleep. The social worker's expression as she surveyed the small apartment, the bottles drying on the counter, the laundry piled on a chair, the makeshift sleeping area Gina had created in the corner of her bedroom for the triplets, spoke volumes. "This is cozy," Opal said, and the pause before cozy was damning. "It's clean," Gina said defensively. "It's safe. And it's filled with love." "Love doesn't pay for formula," Opal countered, making notes on her clipboard. "Have you calculated the monthly cost of caring for 3 infants? Gina had. The number made her want to vomit. "I'm managing. Are you?" Opal's gaze was sharp. "You look exhausted, Miss Seeley. When was the last time you slept more than a few hours? When do any new mothers sleep?" Gina shot back. "Most new mothers don't have triplets," Opal said. "And most have partners. Support systems. You're trying to do this entirely alone." "Delphine was going to do it alone," Gina said quietly. "If she'd lived, she would have been a single mother to 3 babies, and she would have made it work." "Are you saying she wouldn't have been a good mother?" Opal's expression softened slightly. "I'm saying it's okay to acknowledge when something is too much. These babies need me," Gina interrupted. "They need someone who'll keep them together. Someone who'll tell them about their mother. Someone who loves them not because it's a job, but because I promised their mother I would." Her voice cracked slightly. "I know I'm not perfect. I know this place is too small, and I'm probably doing everything wrong. But I'm trying, and I'm not giving up on them." Opal was quiet for a long moment, studying Gina's face. Then she closed her notebook. "I'll be back in 2 weeks for another visit. In the meantime, I'm approving a continuation of your temporary custody. But Miss Seeley, if I see any signs that you're not coping, that the babies are being neglected in any way, I won't hesitate to intervene. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Gina said. After Opal left, Gina collapsed on the couch and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she wiped her eyes, checked on the sleeping triplets, and got back to work. That night, after her evening cleaning shift, Gina stopped by Delphine's old apartment. The landlord had packed up her friend's belongings, preparing to clear out the unit. Among the boxes, Gina found photo albums, journals, and the baby items Delphine had carefully collected. She sat on the floor and opened one of the journals, recognizing her friend's looping handwriting immediately. "I'm scared," one entry read. "I'm going to be a mother to 3 babies, and I'm terrified I won't be enough. But I love them already. I love them so much it hurts. And I know that if something happens to me, Gina will take care of them. She's the strongest person I know. She doesn't see it in herself, but I do. She's going to be an amazing mother to my girls." Gina pressed the journal to her chest and sobbed, ugly, broken sobs that had been building for days. She cried for Delphine, who'd never get to watch her daughters grow up. She cried for 3 babies, who'd never know their mother's touch. And she cried for herself, terrified that she'd failed them all. But when the tears finally stopped, Gina stood up, collected the boxes, and drove home. She set up the nursery items in her bedroom, the portable cribs Delphine had bought, the mobile that played soft lullabies, the stuffed animals that still smelled faintly of her friend's perfume. And that night, when the triplets woke crying at the same time, Gina picked them up one by one and held them close, singing the lullabies Delphine had planned to sing. "I've got you," she whispered. "All three of you. And I'm not letting go. No matter what comes, I'm not letting go." She didn't know that across the city, a man named Briar Duncan was lying awake in a luxury hospital room, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the memory of a woman's face in the rain. She didn't know he'd hired private investigators to find her. She didn't know that her decision to disappear that night had only made him more desperate to find her. She didn't know that the collision she'd been trying to avoid was already inevitable. All she knew was that she'd made a promise written in blood and tears, and keeping it meant sacrificing everything she had left, even if it destroyed her. Chapter 3. The man who couldn't forget. Briar Duncan woke to pain that felt like fire wrapped around his ribs and white walls that hurt his eyes. The private hospital room smelled of antiseptic and expensive flowers, lilies probably, sent by his company's public relations team. Everything was too bright, too clean, too quiet, except for the steady beep of machines monitoring his stubborn heart. That heart shouldn't be beating. He knew that with absolute certainty. He remembered the storm, the hydroplane, the tree appearing out of nowhere, the impact that had felt like the world exploding. And then her face, a woman's face hovering above him in the rain, her hands on his chest, her voice commanding him to breathe as if she could argue with death itself and win. She'd won. But when Briar had opened his eyes, surrounded by paramedics and flashing lights, she was gone. Disappeared like a ghost who'd only come to deliver him back to the living before vanishing into the storm. "You're awake," a voice said from the doorway. Landry Oakes, Briar's right hand and the closest thing he had to a friend, entered with a tablet under his arm, and concern etched into his dark features. "About time. You've been out for almost 2 days. 2 days?" Briar tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as his ribs screamed in protest. "Fractured ribs, burns on your arms, concussion," Landry listed, settling into the chair beside the bed. "You're lucky to be alive. The car was completely destroyed. If someone hadn't pulled you out when they did." He stopped, shaking his head. "The paramedics said someone performed CPR at the scene. By the time they arrived, you were breathing on your own." "Her," Briar said immediately. "It was a woman. Did they get her information?" "I need to thank her." Landry's expression shifted to something uncomfortable. "That's the thing. There's no record of who she was. She didn't stay at the scene. The paramedics assumed she was just a passerby who didn't want to get involved with the paperwork." "Find her," Briar said, and his voice carried an intensity that made Landry blink. "Briar, I'm serious, Landry. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. Find the woman who saved my life." Over the next several weeks, as Briar recovered from his injuries, finding that mysterious woman became something more than gratitude. It became an obsession that he couldn't explain and wasn't sure he wanted to. He'd never believed in destiny. He'd built his wealth through calculated risks and careful planning, not faith in cosmic forces. But lying in that hospital bed, remembering the feel of her hands bringing him back from darkness, Briar felt something shift inside him, something fundamental and irreversible. She wasn't just the woman who'd saved his life. She was proof that there were still people in the world who did extraordinary things without expecting anything in return. In his world of contracts and negotiations, where every favor had a price and every relationship was transactional, she was an anomaly he couldn't stop thinking about. Landry hired a private investigator, discreetly, because the whole thing sounded vaguely unhinged when spoken aloud. But the investigator found nothing. No witnesses who'd gotten a good look at the rescuer. No traffic cameras that had captured a clear image. She'd appeared and disappeared like smoke. "Maybe you should let this go," Landry suggested carefully after several weeks of dead ends. "Be grateful you're alive and move on." "I can't," Briar admitted, staring out his penthouse window at the city below. I don't know how to explain it, but I need to find her. I need her to know. He stopped, frustrated by his inability to articulate the feeling. Know what? That it mattered, Briar said quietly. That what she did mattered. The break in the case came from an unexpected source, a gas station receipt found in the wreckage of his car. Briar had stopped for fuel an hour before the accident, and the receipt had somehow survived. On the back, barely legible, was a handwritten note. Gina Seeley Southridge, owing Dell $20 for coffee. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The investigator tracked down a Gina Seeley in the Southridge neighborhood, a part of the city Briar rarely thought about, the kind of place where people worked multiple jobs just to keep their heads above water, where dreams came in smaller sizes and survival was the primary ambition. This might not even be the right person, the investigator warned, handing Briar a folder. Common name, and the note could mean anything, but when Briar opened the folder and saw her driver's license photo, he knew. Even in the grainy, unflattering photo that made everyone look like a criminal, he recognized her eyes. The same eyes that had looked into his during the storm, fierce and determined and unwilling to let him die. That's her, Briar said, his voice hoarse. What else did you find? The investigator's report was thorough and devastating. Gina Seeley worked at the Riverside Diner during the day and cleaned offices at night. She lived alone in a small apartment. No criminal record, no family listed. A completely ordinary life of quiet struggle that millions of people lived but remained. Invisible to people like Briar, what the report didn't mention, what the investigator had missed because it was so recent, was that Gina Seeley's life had fundamentally changed in the weeks since she'd saved Briar's life. Briar drove to Southridge himself, ignoring Landry's concerns about safety and optics. The neighborhood looked tired, buildings that had seen better decades, streets that needed repair, people who moved with the weariness of those who worked too hard for too little. He parked across from her apartment building and waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for exactly. A glimpse of her, maybe. A chance to approach her in a natural way, instead of showing up at her door like some stalker. What he saw when she emerged from the building at dawn made his heart stutter. Gina carried 3 infant car seats, struggling with their combined weight as she maneuvered down the stairs. 3 car seats. 3 babies. She moved with the mechanical efficiency of someone running on pure determination. Her face drawn with exhaustion as she strapped each seat into the back of an old sedan that looked like it might not survive another winter. Briar watched her kiss each baby's forehead before getting in the driver's seat. He watched her rest her head against the steering wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. And when she drove away, he followed at a safe distance. She went to the Riverside Diner, a modest establishment that served breakfast to construction workers and office employees, grabbing something quick before work. Through the window, Briar watched her tie on an apron. Check on the babies in a small office the manager must have let her use, and then put on a smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. She moved through the morning rush with practiced efficiency, balancing plates, refilling coffee, chatting with customers who probably had no idea what kind of night she'd had. During her break, Briar saw her slip into the office and sit on the floor with the 3 babies, feeding them bottles while she ate a piece of toast that looked like her only meal. His chest ached watching her. This woman had saved his life and then gone home to a life that was clearly drowning her. She had 3 babies. He assumed they were hers, couldn't imagine any other explanation, and was working herself into an early grave trying to provide for them alone. Where was their father? Why wasn't anyone helping her? How was she even functioning on what must be almost no sleep? That night, Briar followed her to the office building where she cleaned. He watched through windows as she vacuumed floors and emptied trash bins. The babies asleep in their car seats in the corner of whatever room she was working in. She moved like a ghost, silent, efficient, invisible to a world that didn't want to see people like her. By the time Briar returned to his penthouse, dawn was breaking again. He hadn't slept. He couldn't sleep. All he could see was Gina's face, exhausted, determined, suffering, and all he could think was that this woman had saved his life while barely surviving her. Odette Landry found him staring at a folder of photographs the investigator had taken. "You're obsessed with her," Landry said bluntly. "You need to either do something about it or let it go before this becomes unhealthy." "She has 3 babies, Breyer said, not looking up from a photo of Gina carrying the car seats. "She's working 2 jobs and raising 3 infants alone. She saved my life and then went back to a life that's killing her slowly." "Maybe she has family helping," Landry suggested. "A partner who works different hours." "She's alone," Breyer interrupted. "I watched her for an entire day. She's completely alone. And I can't—" He stopped, frustrated. "I can't stop thinking about it. About her. She left that night because she didn't want anything from me. She didn't want recognition or money or gratitude. She just wanted to disappear back into her life. So why don't you respect that?" Landry asked carefully. Breyer looked up and his expression was raw. "Because I think she left because she's afraid. Afraid of people like me. Afraid of what accepting help might mean. And I think she's drowning, Landry. I think she's drowning and doesn't think she deserves a life raft. What are you going to do?" Breyer closed the folder and stood, decision crystallizing. "I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to thank her, and I'm going to find a way to help her, whether she wants it or not." "That sounds like a plan that could go wrong in about 50 different ways," Landry warned. "Probably," Breyer agreed. "But doing nothing isn't an option anymore." The next evening, Breyer waited outside the Riverside Diner until Gina's shift ended. When she emerged, juggling her bag and her keys, preparing to retrieve the babies from the manager's office, he stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice came out rougher than intended. "Gina Seeley?" She turned, and the moment their eyes met, recognition flickered across her face. Then immediately her expression hardened into something cold and defensive. "You," she said, and the single word carried accusation. "You remember me," Breyer said, relief and anxiety mixing in his chest. "Of course I remember you," Gina said, gripping her keys like a weapon. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "I had to thank you," Breyer said, taking a careful step closer. She took a step back. "You saved my life that night. You pulled me from a burning car, performed CPR, brought me back from—" "I did what anyone would do," Gina interrupted, her voice sharp. "And I don't want your thanks." "Then what do you want?" Breyer asked, genuinely confused by her hostility. "Please, let me. I'd like to offer you a reward. Whatever you need. Money? A better car? Help with—" "I don't want your money," Gina said, and now her voice shook slightly. "I don't want anything from you. What I want is for you to forget you ever saw me." "Why?" The word escaped before Breyer could stop it. "Why did you run that night? Why are you running now?" Gina's jaw clenched, emotions warring across her face. "Because I know men like you. I learned a long time ago that accepting help from men with money comes with strings attached. You feel guilty because I saved your life, so you want to throw money at me to make yourself feel better. But I don't need rescuing. I don't need charity. And I definitely don't need complications. It's not charity," Breyer said desperately. "And I'm not trying to— Is there anything else?" Gina interrupted, her walls firmly back in place. "Because I have 3 babies waiting for me, 2 jobs to juggle, and exactly 0 time for whatever this is." 3 babies. So she'd acknowledge them. Breyer's heart ached, thinking about her trying to manage triplets alone. "If you ever need anything," he started. "I won't," Gina said firmly. "Goodbye. Don't follow me. Don't come here again. Just forget about me." She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the diner to collect her children. Breyer stood in the parking lot, watching her leave, and made a decision that would change both their lives. He couldn't forget her. He wouldn't forget her, and if she wouldn't accept his help openly, he'd find another way, because Gina Seeley had saved his life. And now, whether she wanted it or not, he was going to save hers. Chapter 4. the stranger's kindness. The electricity bill arrived on a morning when Gina had exactly $17 in her bank account and 2 more days until payday. She opened the envelope with shaking hands, already knowing it would be bad, but hoping for some small mercy from the universe. Past due. Disconnection notice. An amount that might as well have been $1 million for all the chance she had of paying it. No, 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 Gina whispered, staring at the red letters. She couldn't lose electricity. The formula had to stay refrigerated. The babies needed warmth at night. Annabelle started crying from the living room, quickly followed by her sisters. The triplets had developed an uncanny ability to sense when Gina was stressed, as if they could read the tension radiating from her body. "I'm coming," Gina called, shoving the bill into a drawer. "Mama's coming, Mama." The word still felt strange, but the triplets didn't know the difference. To them, she was Mama, the one who fed them, changed them, held them during the long nights. Gina spent the morning cycling through her usual routine. She'd gotten better at managing 3 babies simultaneously, developing systems that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. She could change a diaper with one hand while preparing a bottle with the other. But efficiency didn't solve the fundamental problem. There was never enough. Never enough money, never enough time, never enough of her to go around. Dale let her bring the triplets to work, setting them up in the small office behind the kitchen. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than the alternative. Childcare for 3 was impossible. "You look worse than usual," Dale observed as Gina tied on her apron. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep," Gina lied. "You know I can't keep letting you bring them here forever," Dale said gently. "Corporate's been asking questions." Gina's stomach dropped. "Please, Dale, I just need a little more time." The morning rush was brutal. When she finally got a break, she checked on the babies and found them all crying, hungry, uncomfortable, needing her in ways she couldn't fully address while on the clock. She fed them quickly and whispered apologies they were too young to understand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I can't give you better. But I'm trying." After her shift, Gina drove home through streets that seemed grayer than usual. She parked and began the complicated process of getting 3 babies up 2 flights of stairs. 3 trips, 1 for each car seat. On her second trip up, she found something on her doorstep. A cardboard box, unmarked, sitting innocently in front of her door. Gina approached the box cautiously. When she opened it, she found groceries. Not cheap stuff either. Good formula, organic baby food, fresh vegetables. There was no note, no indication of who'd left it. She brought the box inside with the last car seat, her mind racing. The electricity bill. She dug through the drawer and found something impossible. A stamped envelope addressed to the power company with a money order for the full amount due. Someone had paid her bill. Someone knew exactly how much she owed. Someone was watching her. Over the next week, more mysterious gifts appeared. Her car was suddenly running smoothly. A local daycare called to offer her 3 free subsidized spots. It was too perfect, too suspicious. Gina lay awake, trying to figure out who was doing this. The only person she could think of was Briar Duncan, rich man playing hero, thinking he could fix her life with his checkbook. The rage finally exploded the day she found him leaving another delivery at her door. Gina had worked a double shift and arrived home to find a tall figure in an expensive coat setting down groceries. When he turned and she saw his face, something in her snapped. "You," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "I should have known." Briar straightened, caught. "Gina, I can explain. You've been spying on me. Following me. Breaking into my home." "I didn't break in," Briar protested. "I just wanted to help." "Help?" Gina laughed bitterly. "You think stalking me is helping? I told you I didn't want your money. You think your money fixes everything? I didn't save your life so you could turn me into your guilt project." Her voice rose with months of exhaustion pouring out. "I'm not your redemption story. I'm a person, and I told you to leave me alone." "You're drowning," Briar said quietly, and something in his voice made Gina pause. "I've watched you. I've seen how hard you're working, how little you're sleeping. You're breaking yourself into pieces trying to keep those babies alive. And you're doing it alone because you're too proud or too scared to accept help. You don't know anything about me, Gina said. But her voice wavered. I know you saved my life without expecting anything in return, Briar said. I know you took in 3 babies that weren't even yours. I know you're working 2 jobs and getting maybe 3 hours of sleep a night. I know you won't ask for help because someone hurt you once and taught you that people with money can't be trusted. Gina's breath caught. How did he know so much? This is about guilt, Briar continued. I feel guilty that you're suffering while I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But more than that, he paused, something raw crossing his face. I can't stop thinking about you, about those babies, about how you deserve so much better. I don't need your pity, Gina said, but the anger was draining out of her. It's not pity, Briar said softly. It's respect. It's admiration. Please, just let me help. No strings attached. Just let me pay for the daycare. Let me make sure your car is safe. Gina wanted to say no, but she was so tired. And the truth was she was drowning, and he was offering a lifeline. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Briar looked at her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. Because you saw me dying in that car and decided I was worth saving. Even though you didn't know me, even though it put you at risk. How can I do any less for you? Behind Gina, all 3 babies started crying. I have to... Gina started. I know, Briar said, picking up the grocery bag. May I at least bring this inside for you? Gina hesitated, then nodded. She let him follow her into the small apartment that was her entire world. Briar set the groceries on the counter while Gina tended to the babies. She was acutely aware of him watching as she moved through her routine. You're amazing with them, Briar said quietly. I'm surviving, Gina corrected. They deserve better than me, struggling to give them the bare minimum. They have someone who loves them, Briar said. That's more than a lot of kids get. Gina looked at him then, really looked at him. He stood in her tiny kitchen, looking out of place in his expensive clothes, but his expression held nothing but genuine concern. The daycare spots, Gina said slowly. Are they real? Or will they disappear if I tell you to leave? They're real, Briar promised. Everything I've arranged will continue whether you want me in your life or not. No strings, Gina. I can't afford to trust you, Gina admitted, her voice breaking. I can't afford to let my guard down and get hurt again. Then don't trust me yet, Briar said. Let me earn it. Let me prove I'm not like whoever hurt you before. Before Briar left, he said one more thing. Those babies are lucky to have you. But Gina, you're allowed to let someone help carry the weight. You're allowed to not do this alone. After he left, Gina sank onto the couch with Mirabelle in her arms and finally let herself cry. Not desperate sobs. Just quiet tears of relief mixed with fear. Maybe accepting help didn't mean losing herself. Maybe letting someone in didn't mean getting destroyed. But trust was a fragile thing, and Gina had learned to guard it carefully. Briar Duncan would have to prove he was different, and somehow, despite everything, a small part of her wanted him to succeed. Chapter 5. When pride meets persistence. The daycare was called Little Wonders, and it looked like something from a dream Gina hadn't dared to have. Clean floors, bright murals on the walls, toys that weren't broken. The staff smiled like they actually enjoyed their jobs. And when Gina brought the triplets for their first day, the director, a warm woman named Patricia Delmore, greeted them like family. You must be Annabelle. Mirabelle and Isabel, Patricia cooed, bending down to the car seats. We've been so excited to meet you. This is really free, Gina asked, unable to believe it. The scholarship covers everything. Everything, Patricia confirmed. There's a benefactor who specifically wanted to help single mothers in difficult circumstances. Gina knew who the benefactor was. She'd confronted Briar about it over the phone the night before, and he'd simply said, "Does it matter? The spots are there. Use them." She'd wanted to refuse. But Dale had been making pointed comments about the babies at the diner, and Gina couldn't lose her job. She couldn't afford principals when her children's survival was at stake. Leaving the triplets that first morning felt like cutting off her own limbs. Annabelle cried when Gina set her down. Mirabelle's little face scrunched up with confusion. Isabel just stared at her with those big, dark eyes. "They'll be fine," Patricia assured her. "And you can call any time to check on them." Gina called 4 times during her shift. By the end of the day, Gina felt lighter than she had in weeks. She'd actually slept for an hour during her break. When she picked up the triplets that evening, they were clean, fed, and content. Patricia handed her a folder with notes about each baby's day. "Annabelle is adventurous," Patricia said with a smile. "She tried to crawl today. Mirabelle loves music. She calms down immediately when we sing. And Isabel is observant. She watches everything." Gina's eyes burned with unexpected tears. Someone had noticed her daughters as individuals. "Thank you," Gina whispered. Clutching the folder, she was strapping the babies into her car when a familiar voice called out, "How was the first day?" Gina turned to find Briar leaning against his own car. He looked different today, less formal, in a simple sweater and jeans. "Were you waiting for me?" Gina asked, her defenses rising automatically. "I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly," Briar said. "I don't need anything," Gina said, but the words lacked heat. "Can I buy you dinner?" Briar asked. "As a thank you for letting me help," Gina almost laughed. "You want to thank me for accepting your help?" "I want to spend time with you," Briar corrected. "The help is separate." Something in his tone made Gina pause. This wasn't pity, this was genuine interest, and that was somehow more terrifying. "I need to get the girls home," Gina said. "Fed, bathed, in bed." "Then let me help with that," Briar offered. "I'll come with you, help with the routine, and when they're asleep we'll order takeout. Nothing fancy. Just conversation." Every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance, but she was lonely. And the idea of adult conversation was tempting beyond reason. "Fine," Gina heard herself say. "But if the girls don't like you, you're leaving," Briar smiled. Fair enough. The girls loved him. The moment they arrived at the apartment, Annabelle started reaching for Briar, making grabbing motions with her little hands. When he picked her up, she settled against his chest like she'd been doing it her whole life. "Traitor," Gina muttered. But she was smiling. Briar helped with everything. He changed diapers without flinching, prepared bottles with careful attention, and bounced fussy babies while Gina managed the others. He asked questions about their routine, their preferences, what each cry meant. And he listened, really listened. "Mirabelle doesn't like her bottle too warm," Gina instructed. "And Isabel prefers to be held facing out so she can see everything." "Got it," Briar said, adjusting Isabel in his arms. The baby cooed contentedly. By the time all 3 babies were fed, bathed, and sleeping, Gina felt exhausted. But Briar was still there, still present, not running away. "You're good at that," Gina said, sinking onto the couch. "It's easier with 2 people, Briar observed, settling beside her. "How do you do it alone every night?" "Poorly," Gina admitted. "With a lot of mistakes and apologies they're too young to understand." They ordered pizza and ate in comfortable silence. But then Briar asked the question Gina had been dreading. "The babies. They're not yours biologically, are they?" Gina went still. "How did you—" "The investigator I hired found records," Briar admitted. "I'm sorry for invading your privacy. But Gina, what you did, taking in 3 children who weren't yours, that's extraordinary." "I made a promise to my best friend," Gina said quietly. "She died giving birth to them. She made me swear I'd raise them together. It wasn't extraordinary. It was love. It's both," Briar said firmly. "Most people would have said it was too much." "But you didn't hesitate." "I hesitated," Gina corrected. "I was terrified. I'm still terrified every day." "You're not failing," Briar said with conviction. "You're giving them everything you have." "That's sacrifice." "That's love." Tears pricked Gina's eyes. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen by someone who wasn't judging, but simply recognizing her struggle as valid. "Why are you doing this?" Gina asked. "And don't say it's guilt." "What is it really?" Briar was quiet for a moment. "I've spent my whole life accumulating things," he finally said. "Money, property, success. But when I was lying in that car, feeling my life slip away, all I could think was how empty it all was." He looked at her, his eyes vulnerable. "Then you appeared." This woman who risked everything to save a stranger, who asked for nothing in return, who proved that some people still measure worth by what you give, not what you have. And I needed to know you. I needed to understand what makes someone like you exist. I'm not special, Gina said. You're the most special person I've ever met, Briar countered. Watching you with those babies, seeing how you love them even when it costs you everything, it makes me want to be better. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Gina felt her walls cracking. I should tell you to leave, Gina said softly. I should protect myself, but, Briar prompted gently. But I don't want you to leave, Gina admitted. And that terrifies me. From the bedroom, Mirabelle cried. Gina stood automatically, but Briar stood too. Let me, he said. You finish eating. I've got her. Gina watched him disappear into the bedroom, heard his gentle voice soothing Mirabelle, heard the baby's cries taper into coos, and something in her chest cracked open just a little. When Briar emerged with Mirabelle sleeping against his shoulder, he found Gina crying silently on the couch. Gina, he said, alarmed. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Gina said, wiping her eyes. That's the problem. This feels right, and I don't know how to trust that. Briar carefully set Mirabelle back in her crib, then returned and sat beside Gina. You don't have to trust it yet, he said quietly. But maybe you could let yourself hope. Just a little? Gina looked at him, at this man who'd refused to take no for an answer, who'd somehow worked his way past her defenses without forcing anything. Maybe, she whispered. Maybe I could try. That night, after Briar left with a promise to visit again soon, Gina lay in bed thinking about hope, about how dangerous it was, how it could shatter you if you weren't careful, but also how empty life was without it. Mirabelle stirred in her crib, making little noises. Gina reached over and patted her back until she settled. And in the darkness, Gina made herself a different kind of promise. She would let Briar in, slowly, carefully, with every defense ready. She would give him a chance to prove he was different. She would let herself hope, even if it scared her, because the alternative, a life of perpetual isolation, wasn't really living. It was just existing. And her daughters deserved to see her do more than survive. They deserved to see her live. Chapter 6. When the past returns with venom thorn. Caswell had the kind of face that looked handsome until you saw the cruelty in his eyes. Gina recognized him instantly, even though it had been years since she'd last seen him, years since she'd discovered his promises were lies, and his love had a price tag attached. He stood in the diner parking lot during her afternoon shift, leaning against an expensive car that probably wasn't his. His smile predatory and familiar. Gina's blood turned to ice. Hello. Gina, Thorne said, pushing off the car as she approached. Long time, what do you want? Gina asked, keeping her voice flat. That's not very friendly, Thorne said, feigning hurt. Can't an old friend stop by to say hello? We were never friends, Gina said coldly, and I don't have time for this. Leave. Heard you've become quite the mother, Thorne continued. His eyes gleamed with something ugly. 3 babies at once. That's impressive. Though I have to wonder, who's the lucky father? Or fathers? Gina's hands clenched into fists. That's none of your business. See, that's where you're wrong, Thorne said. When I started asking around about you, people got real chatty. Turns out you showed up with 3 babies all of a sudden. No pregnancy, no father, just boom, instant mother. Makes people wonder. Understanding crashed over Gina. You're spreading rumors about me. Not rumors, Thorne said innocently. Just questions. Natural questions. Like whether it's appropriate for someone with your questionable situation to be raising children. They're my children, Gina said, her voice shaking with rage. I'm their legal guardian. Delphine wanted me to have them. Delphine, Thorne repeated thoughtfully. Right, the friend who conveniently died right before you became a mother. Must have been quite the inheritance opportunity. Gina's vision went red. Don't you dare. I'm just saying what other people are thinking, Thorne interrupted. 3 babies, no father, suspicious circumstances. The story practically writes itself. What do you want? Gina asked, forcing herself to stay calm. Maybe I just want to help, Thorne said. Maybe I'm concerned about those babies being raised in poverty by a woman who can barely afford to feed herself. No, Gina said flatly. Whatever you're scheming, the answer is no. Thorne's mask slipped, revealing nastiness underneath. You think you have a choice? You think people will side with you when I tell them the truth? About how those babies aren't even yours? About how you're playing mother while working 2 jobs and barely surviving? The truth is I'm raising my best friend's children because she asked me to, Gina said. There's nothing shameful about that. Then why haven't you told anyone? Thorne pressed. Why do people think they're yours? What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything, Gina said, but her voice wavered. The truth was, she hadn't corrected people's assumptions because explaining Delphine's death was too painful. Here's what's going to happen, Thorne said, dropping the pretense. You're going to pay me to go away. $5,000 and I disappear. I stop asking questions. I stop talking to your neighbors. I stop making people wonder if those babies should be taken away from you. I don't have $5,000, Gina said, her heart pounding. Then you better find it, Thorne said. Because if you don't, I'm going to make your life a living hell. I'll call social services. I'll tell them you lied on your guardianship application. I'll make sure those babies end up in foster care, split up across the city. And it'll be your fault. He turned to leave, then paused. You have a week, Gina. Think about what matters more, your pride or those babies. The rumors started immediately. Within days, Gina noticed the difference. Customers at the diner whispered when she approached. Neighbors avoided eye contact. One mother at Little Wonders pulled her child away when Gina arrived. What's going on? Patricia asked quietly one afternoon. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Gina lied, but everything wasn't fine. Opal Fentress called to schedule an emergency home visit. I've received some concerning reports, she said. We need to discuss them immediately. This was it. This was Thorne's plan in action. He'd weaponized the system against her, and now everything she'd fought for was crumbling. She couldn't find $5,000. She couldn't pay off Thorne, couldn't make him stop, couldn't protect herself from the poison he was spreading. For the first time since taking custody of the triplets, Gina felt truly helpless. That evening, as she fed the babies and tried not to fall apart, someone knocked on her door. Gina opened it to find Briar standing there, his expression dark with anger. I heard what's happening, he said. About the rumors. About some man threatening you. How did you? Gina started. Doesn't matter, Briar interrupted. Tell me everything. Who is he? What does he want? It's complicated, Gina said, exhaustion making her voice thin. He's someone from my past. Someone I trusted once. He's spreading lies about me, threatening to call social services, trying to get the babies taken away. Why? Briar asked, stepping inside. Money, Gina said bitterly. He wants $5,000 to disappear, and if I don't pay, he's going to destroy everything. Then I'll pay him, Briar said immediately. No, Gina said sharply. Absolutely not. I'm not taking your money for this. Gina, I mean it, Briar, Gina interrupted. This is my problem. You can't just throw money at it and make it go away. Why not? Briar demanded. If money solves the problem, because it doesn't solve the problem, Gina shouted, startling the babies. She lowered her voice, fighting tears. Don't you see? If I let you pay him off, he'll just come back for more. Extortion doesn't end with one payment. It ends when you refuse to play the game. So what's your plan? Briar asked. Let him destroy your reputation? Let him take the babies away? I don't have a plan, Gina admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know what to do. He's weaponizing my love for these babies against me, and I don't know how to fight back. Briar crossed the room and took her hands, his grip firm. You're not alone in this. I won't let him hurt you or those babies. And I don't care if you want my help or not, you're getting it. Why? Gina whispered, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. Why do you care so much? We barely know each other. Briar's expression softened. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. And those babies, they're worth protecting. Whatever this man wants, whatever he's threatening, we'll handle it together. I can't ask you to... You're not asking, Briar said firmly. I'm offering. There's a difference. For a moment, Gina let herself lean into his strength, let herself imagine sharing the burden instead of carrying it alone. But then reality crashed back. "He'll keep coming back," she said. "Even if you handle this, there will always be someone else. Another threat. You can't protect us from everything." "No," Briar agreed. "But I can protect you from this. Let me do that much, please." Gina looked at the triplets, sleeping peacefully, unaware their world was under threat. She thought about Delphine's trust. She thought about promises made and nightmares becoming reality. And she thought about pride, how it had kept her safe, but also alone. How sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. "Okay," she whispered, "but we do this my way. No paying him off, no giving him what he wants. We fight him properly." Briar smiled, fierce and determined. "Whatever you need, I'm with you." What neither of them knew was that Thorn's threats were just the beginning, that the battle for this family would require more than money or determination. It would require sacrifice, revelation, and a public declaration that would change everything. Chapter 7, The Declaration. The South Ridge Community Center smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Gina sat in the back row of folding chairs, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Around her, neighbors she'd lived near for years gathered for the monthly community meeting, usually sparsely attended. But tonight the room was packed. Thorn had made sure of that. He stood near the front, talking with Opal Fentress and several other people Gina didn't recognize. Social workers, probably. Maybe child services representatives. People with the power to tear her family apart. "You don't have to be here," Briar whispered beside her. He'd insisted on coming, had arranged for Patricia to watch the triplets for the evening. "We can leave right now." "No," Gina said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Whatever he's going to say, I need to hear it. I need to face it." The meeting began with mundane community business. Proposed repairs to the playground, upcoming events, budget discussions. But everyone was waiting for the real show. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, Thorn stood and raised his hand to speak. "I'd like to discuss a matter of community concern," he said, his voice carrying false sincerity. "It's about the welfare of 3 innocent children living right here in our neighborhood." Gina's stomach turned to acid. "Many of you know Gina Seeley," Thorn continued, gesturing vaguely in her direction. Several heads turned to look at her. She recently took custody of 3 infant girls under what some might consider suspicious circumstances. The children appeared suddenly, with no pregnancy, no father, and a story about a deceased friend that conveniently can't be verified. "That's not true," Gina said, her voice shaking. "Delphine Bouchard was my best friend. She died in childbirth and asked me to raise her daughters. Everything was legal and documented, was it?" Thorn asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or did you take advantage of a dying woman's desperation? Did you manipulate her into signing over her children so you could claim whatever benefits or inheritance came with them?" The room erupted in murmurs. Gina felt her face burning with shame and rage. "That's a lie," she said, standing up. "I loved Delphine. She was my sister in every way that mattered. I took her children because she asked me to, because I promised I'd keep them together. There was no manipulation. There was no ulterior motive. There was just love and a promise made to a dying friend. Then why haven't you been honest with people?" Thorn pressed. "Why let everyone assume those babies are yours? Why hide the truth?" "I wasn't hiding anything," Gina said desperately. It's complicated. Explaining that their mother died is painful. I didn't want to relive it every time someone asked questions. Or maybe," Thorn said, his voice dripping with false concern, "you knew that people would have doubts, that they'd question whether a single woman working 2 jobs and living in poverty should be raising 3 infants, that they'd worry about the children's welfare. My children are fine," Gina said, her voice breaking. "They're loved. They're cared for. They're raised by a woman who barely has time for them," Thorn interrupted, "who leaves them at daycare all day, who can't provide them with the basic necessities, who's so exhausted she can barely function. Is that really what's best for these children?" Gina opened her mouth to respond, but no words came, because some of what Thorn was saying was painfully true. She was exhausted. She was barely functioning. The babies did spend most of their time at daycare while she worked, I think, Thorne said, addressing the room now, that we need to seriously consider whether these children should remain in their current situation, whether they might be better served in separate homes with families who have the resources and time to properly care for them. You want to split them up, Gina said, her voice barely above a whisper. You want to tear them apart. I want what's best for them, Thorne said sanctimoniously. Even if that's difficult for you to accept. The room fell silent. Gina could feel dozens of eyes on her, judging, weighing, finding her lacking. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. Then Briar stood. That's enough, he said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. Every head in the room turned toward him. And you are? Thorne asked, clearly annoyed by the interruption. I'm Briar Duncan, he said. And I'm the man whose life Gina Seeley saved. A ripple of recognition went through the crowd. Even in Southridge, the Duncan name meant something. What happened that night, Briar continued, moving to stand beside Gina, should have been the end of my story. I was trapped in a burning car, dying, when a woman I'd never met risked everything to save me. She pulled me from the wreckage. She performed CPR in the pouring rain. She brought me back from death. He paused, looking directly at Gina with an expression so intense it made her breath catch. She didn't ask for anything in return. She didn't give her name. She disappeared before I could thank her because she wanted no recognition, no reward, no connection to someone like me. And do you know what I learned when I finally found her? The room was silent, everyone hanging on his words. I learned that after saving my life, she went home to discover that her best friend had died giving birth. I learned that she took in 3 newborn babies, 3 because she'd made a promise to a dying woman. I learned that she'd sacrificed everything, her savings, her health, her sleep, her entire life, to keep those babies together, to raise them with love even though they weren't hers. Briar's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Gina Seeley is the purest soul I've ever known. While you've been whispering about her, she's been sacrificing. While you've been judging her, she's been loving 3 children who lost their mother. She works 2 jobs, not because she's inadequate, but because she's determined to give those babies everything they need. She's exhausted not because she's failing, but because she refuses to give up. He turned to face the crowd fully now, his expression fierce. This man, Briar pointed at Thorne, is trying to extort her. He's weaponizing your doubts and fears to destroy a good woman who's doing an extraordinary thing. He's not concerned about those babies' welfare. He's concerned about money, about control, about hurting someone who had the strength to walk away from him years ago. Thorne's face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Briar challenged. You showed up in her life after years of absence and immediately started demanding money. You spread lies about her situation and threatened to call social services. You've been trying to blackmail her into paying you to go away. That's not concern. Oh, that's extortion. Murmurs rippled through the crowd again, but this time they were directed at Thorne. Briar turned back to Gina, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, but no less powerful. If anyone here believes Gina is anything less than extraordinary, you're not worthy of knowing her. She embodies everything we claim to value: sacrifice, loyalty, love without conditions. And if you can't see that, the failure is yours, not hers. The room erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. People stood. Opal Fentress was nodding, making notes, and Thorne looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Gina couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at Briar as tears streamed down her face. You didn't have to do that, she whispered when the applause finally died down. Yes, Briar said firmly, I did. After the meeting, people approached Gina to apologize for judging, for believing rumors, for not offering help. One elderly woman hugged her and said, "Those babies are lucky to have you, dear. Don't let anyone tell you different." Opal Fentress pulled Gina aside. "I'll be conducting a thorough investigation of Mr. Caswell's claims," she said formally. But based on what I witnessed tonight, I don't anticipate any issues with your custody arrangement. The home visits will continue, but I want you to know what you're doing is admirable. Those children are fortunate. By the time Gina and Briar left the community center, the night had turned cold. Gina wrapped her arms around herself, still processing everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for defending me, for believing in me when everyone else was ready to condemn me." "I didn't defend you," Briar said, stopping to face her. "I told the truth. There's a difference." They stood in the parking lot, streetlights casting long shadows. And Gina felt something inside her break open, something that had been locked tight since Thorne Caswell had first broken her trust years ago. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Scared to trust this, scared to trust you, scared that if I let my guard down, I'll get hurt again." "I know," Briar said gently. "And I'm not asking you to stop being scared. I'm just asking you to let me prove that not everyone leaves. That not everyone uses your vulnerabilities against you. That some people stay." Gina looked up at him, this man who'd crashed into her life and refused to let her push him away. This man who'd stood before an entire community and declared her worth defending. "Why?" she asked again, needing to understand. "Why are you doing all this?" Briar reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek, his touch careful and reverent. "Because when I died in that car," he said softly, "everything stopped mattering. Everything I'd built, everything I'd achieved, none of it mattered. But then you appeared, and you made me want to be someone who matters to someone who matters. You make me want to be better than I've been. I'm just—" Gina started. "Extraordinary," Briar finished. "You're extraordinary, Gina, and it terrifies me that you can't see it." The distance between them felt charged, electric. Gina could feel herself leaning toward him, drawn by something stronger than logic or fear. But before either of them could close the gap, Gina's phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. "The babies," Gina said, stepping back and answering immediately. "Hello?" "Everything's fine," Patricia assured her. "But Mirabelle is asking for you. Won't settle down for anyone else. I think she needs her mama." "I'm coming," Gina said, relief and guilt mixing in her chest. "I'll be right there." She hung up and looked at Briar apologetically. "I need to—" "I know," he said, smiling. "Go get your daughter. I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Gina agreed. As she drove to pick up the triplets, Gina felt lighter than she had in months. The threat wasn't completely gone. Thorne would need to be dealt with properly, but it had been defanged. The community knew the truth now. Opal had witnessed it all. And most importantly, Gina wasn't alone anymore. She had someone in her corner, someone who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stand beside her anyway. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, and for the first time in years, Gina let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, not all men were Thorne Caswell. Maybe some men were Briar Duncan. Maybe some men stayed. Chapter 8. The Battle for a Family. Gina woke to soft sunlight filtering through her bedroom curtains and the unusual sensation of having slept for more than a few hours. She blinked at her ceiling, disoriented, before reality crashed back. The babies. Where were the babies? Panic had her sitting upright before she registered the sounds from the living room, not crying, but giggling. Baby giggles mixed with a deep male voice doing something. That sounded like animal impressions. She stumbled out of bed and found a scene that made her heart stop. Briar sat on her living room floor in yesterday's clothes, looking rumpled and exhausted, with all three triplets crawling around him. Annabelle had pulled herself up using his arm and was bouncing excitedly. Mirabelle was attempting to climb into his lap. And Isabel sat nearby, watching with those serious dark eyes, a smile playing at her lips. "What are you doing here?" Gina asked, her voice rough from sleep. Briar looked up, and his tired smile transformed his whole face. "Good morning. You fell asleep on the couch last night after we got back with the babies. I didn't want to wake you, so I stayed to help with the night feedings." Gina stared at him. "You've been here all night?" "Day." Someone had to make sure these three didn't stage a coup, Briar said, making a silly face at Annabel that sent her into fresh giggles. They're quite demanding when they want to be. You didn't have to, Gina started. I wanted to, Briar interrupted gently. And before you argue, you needed the sleep. When's the last time you got more than 3 hours at a time? Gina couldn't remember. She looked at the clock. She'd slept for nearly 7 hours. 7 uninterrupted hours while this man had stayed awake taking care of her children. Thank you, she whispered, emotion clogging her throat. Come sit, Briar said, patting the floor beside him. Have breakfast with us. I made bottles earlier, and there's coffee in the kitchen. Probably terrible coffee, since I couldn't figure out your machine. But it's hot and caffeinated. Gina poured herself a cup and settled on the floor beside Briar. Mirabelle immediately crawled over and climbed into her lap, and the familiar weight of her daughter grounded Gina in a way nothing else could. I talked to my lawyer yesterday, Briar said after a moment. About Thorne and his threats. Gina tensed. Briar, just listen, he said. Petra Vachon is the best family attorney in the state. She specializes in custody disputes and guardianship cases, and she's very interested in your situation. I can't afford. You don't need to, Briar said firmly. I'm paying for it. And before you argue, think about the babies. This isn't about pride anymore, Gina. Thorne made legal threats. He's trying to take the girls away. You need proper representation, Gina wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain her independence. But Isabel made a soft cooing sound. And Annabel was attempting to eat Briar's shoelace, and Mirabelle's little hand was wrapped around Gina's finger. She couldn't lose them. Pride wasn't worth losing her daughters. Okay, Gina said quietly, but I'm paying you back, somehow, eventually. Deal, Briar said, though they both knew she'd never be able to repay what this would cost. Petra Vachon arrived at Gina's apartment that afternoon, a formidable woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She settled at Gina's small dining table and listened intently as Gina explained everything. Delphine's death, the guardianship papers, Thorne's threats, the rumors, the community meeting. Do you have the original documentation from when you took custody? Petra asked, making notes. Gina retrieved the folder she'd been given at the hospital. Birth certificates, guardianship papers, Delphine's handwritten note. Petra reviewed everything meticulously. This is solid, Petra said finally. Your guardianship is completely legal. Ms. Bouchard's wishes were clearly documented. And the note, while not legally binding, supports your claim about her intentions. So Thorne can't take them away? Gina asked, hope flaring in her chest. Not through legal channels, Petra said. But he can make things difficult. He can file frivolous claims that require court appearances and investigations. He can try to drag this out and drain your resources. The system is designed to protect children, but sometimes bad actors exploit that. What do I do? Gina asked. We go on offense, Petra said, her expression hardening. We file for a restraining order based on his harassment and threats. We document every interaction. We build a case that shows you're a fit guardian, and he's acting maliciously. And we make it very clear that if he continues this behavior, he'll face legal consequences. Over the next week, Petra worked with ruthless efficiency. She filed motions, gathered evidence, and interviewed witnesses from the community meeting who'd heard Thorne's threats. She coordinated with Opal Fentress to ensure social services had a complete picture of the situation. And then came the court date. Gina walked into the courthouse with Briar beside her and Petra leading the way, feeling like she was heading toward her execution. Thorne was there with his own lawyer, a sleazy-looking man who probably specialized in exactly this kind of harassment. The hearing was brief but brutal. Thorne's lawyer tried to paint Gina as an unfit guardian, suggesting she'd coerced Delphine's deathbed wishes and was now struggling to provide adequate care. They presented evidence of her financial instability and exhaustion. Petra demolished every argument with precision. My client took in 3 infants out of love and loyalty, Petra said. her voice sharp. She has never missed a bill, never neglected the children's needs, and has consistently provided a loving, stable home. The only instability in these children's lives comes from Mr. Caswell's harassment and threats. She presented documentation of Thorne's extortion attempts, witness statements from the community meeting, and a detailed timeline of his campaign against Gina. Mr. Caswell has no legal standing to make claims about these children, Petra continued. He has no relationship to them, no connection to their deceased mother, and no legitimate concern for their welfare. His only motivation is financial, specifically. Inheritance money that will pass to the children when they come of age. Thorne's lawyer tried to object, but the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, held up her hand. "I've heard enough," the judge said. "Ms. Seeley, your guardianship is confirmed and upheld. Mr. Caswell, you are hereby ordered to cease all contact with Ms. Seeley and the children. If you violate this order, you will face contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution for harassment." Relief crashed over Gina so powerfully she nearly collapsed. Briar's hand on her back steadied her, and Petra's satisfied smile told her it was over. Really over. Outside the courthouse, Gina finally let herself break down. Briar held her while she sobbed, not sad tears, but the release of weeks of terror and stress and fear. "It's done," he whispered into her hair. "He can't hurt you anymore. You're safe. The babies are safe." "I can't believe it," Gina said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I thought I was so sure I'd lose them." "Never," Briar said fiercely. "I would never have let that happen. We would have fought as long as it took." Gina pulled back to look at him, this man who'd become essential to her life without her permission. "You did this. You saved us. We saved each other," Briar corrected. "You saved my life that night in the storm. I'm just returning the favor." "It's not the same," Gina said. "What you did, hiring Petra, standing up at that meeting, being there through all of this, that's not just returning a favor. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence, unable to name what was building between them, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "That's what people do when they care about each other," Briar finished softly. "They show up. They fight. They refuse to let the people they love face battles alone." Love. The word hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. "I'm still scared," Gina admitted. "Scared to depend on you. Scared of what happens if you decide this is too much work and you leave." "I'm not leaving," Briar said, taking her hands. "I know you're scared. I know Thorne and whoever came before him taught you that people with money use it as a weapon. That help always comes with strings. That love is conditional. But Gina, I'm not them. I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now," Gina said, her voice breaking. "But when things get hard—" "Things are already hard," Briar interrupted. "Triplets are hard. Midnight feedings are hard. Juggling 2 jobs is hard. And I'm still here. I'm still showing up every day. I'm still choosing you and those babies over everything else." He was right. He'd been proving it for weeks now. Showing up without fanfare, helping without expecting praise, being present through chaos and crisis. He'd earned her trust through actions, not words. "I don't know how to do this," Gina whispered. "How to let someone in. How to trust that it won't end in disaster." "We figure it out together," Briar said. "One day at a time. One bottle feeding, one diaper change, one moment at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me be here. Let me be part of this." Gina looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity. No hidden agenda, no ulterior motive. Just a man who'd found something worth fighting for and refused to let it go. "Okay," she said, the word barely audible. "But if you hurt them, if you hurt my babies—" "I won't," Briar promised. "They're as much mine now as they are yours. And I protect what's mine." That evening they picked up the triplets from Patricia's care and went back to Gina's apartment. Briar stayed for dinner. Take-out Chinese eaten on the floor while the babies crawled between them. He stayed for bath time, getting soaked helping wash 3 squirming infants. He stayed for bedtime stories. reading with different voices that made even Isabel giggle. And when all three babies were finally asleep, Briar turned to Gina and said, "I should probably go home." "You could stay," Gina said, the offer escaping before she could stop it. "On the couch. You could stay." Briar's expression softened. "Are you sure?" "No," Gina admitted. "But I'm tired of being sure. I'm tired of guarding myself against everything. So yes, stay." That night, with Briar asleep on her couch and her daughters dreaming in the next room, Gina lay in bed, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe life could be more than just survival. That maybe she deserved happiness. That maybe letting someone in wasn't weakness, but strength. She didn't know it yet, but Briar was thinking the same thing on her couch, that this woman and these babies had become his entire world. That everything he'd built before meeting Gina felt hollow compared to this. That he was falling in love, and he didn't want to stop. Chapter 9. The Sacrifice That Proves Everything. The weeks following the court victory should have been perfect. Thorne was gone, the custody was secure, and Briar had become a fixture in their lives, helping with the babies, staying overnight more often than not, seamlessly integrating into their chaotic routine. But Gina felt something shifting, a restlessness she couldn't name, a feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. It started when she noticed the looks. People at the diner whispering, neighbors glancing at Briar's expensive car parked outside her building. The unspoken questions about what a man like him was doing with a woman like her. "Let them talk," Briar said when Gina mentioned it. "They're just jealous." But it wasn't that simple. The looks came with assumptions. That Gina had found herself a sugar daddy. That she was using her situation to trap a wealthy man. That this whole thing was some calculated scheme. It hurt more than Gina wanted to admit. Then Landry showed up at the diner during her shift. "We need to talk," he said, sliding into a booth. His expression was serious, concern. "About Briar?" Gina's stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes," Landry said. "But Gina, he's not okay otherwise. He's been neglecting his business, missing meetings, turning down opportunities. His entire life has become about you and those babies." "I didn't ask him to do any of that," Gina said defensively. "I know you didn't," Landry said gently. "That's the problem. He's doing it anyway, and it's costing him. He's losing clients, losing respect, losing everything he built. And he doesn't care because he's so focused on being here for you." Gina felt sick. "I'll talk to him. Tell him he needs to focus on his work." "That's not why I'm telling you this," Landry said. "I'm telling you because you need to understand what he's giving up, what he's sacrificing, and you need to decide if you're willing to let him." The conversation haunted Gina. That night, after the babies were asleep and Briar was reading on the couch, she confronted him. "Landry came to see me today," she said. Briar looked up from his book, something wary crossing his face. "What did he say?" "That you're destroying your career for us," Gina said bluntly. "That you're losing everything you worked for because you're spending all your time here." "Landry worries too much," Briar said, setting down the book. "Is it true?" Gina pressed. "Are you neglecting your business? Your life?" Briar was quiet for a long moment. "My business will survive, and my life, my real life, is here, with you, with the babies." "That's not sustainable," Gina said, panic rising in her chest. "You can't just abandon everything for us. Eventually you'll resent it, resent me. And then what?" Briar asked, standing. "Then I'll leave? Is that what you're worried about? That I'm going to wake up one day and regret choosing this?" "Yes," Gina admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "Because that's what happens. People make sacrifices they can't sustain, and then they blame the person they sacrificed for." "That's Thorne talking," Briar said firmly. "That's your ex and whoever else hurt you." "That's not me." "How do I know that?" Gina asked desperately. "How do I know you won't wake up in 6 months or a year and realize you gave up too much? That we're not worth what you lost?" Briar crossed the room and took her hands. Because I've never been more certain of anything in my life. That business, that career, it was empty, Gina. It was impressive and successful and completely hollow. But this, he gestured around the small apartment. This is real. You're real. Those babies are real. This is the life I want. You say that now, Gina whispered. I'll say it every day for the rest of my life, if that's what it takes for you to believe me, Briar said. I love you, Gina. I love those babies. And I'm not going anywhere. It was the first time he'd said it. The words hung in the air, terrifying and wonderful. I love you too, Gina admitted, the confession painful and liberating. That's why I'm scared. Because loving you means trusting you. And I don't know if I can survive being wrong about you. You're not wrong about me, Briar said, pulling her close. I promise you're not wrong. But Gina couldn't shake the fear. Over the next few days, she pulled back, creating distance, putting up walls, trying to protect herself from the inevitable hurt. Briar noticed immediately. What's happening? He asked after 3 days of Gina being polite but distant. Did I do something wrong? No, Gina said. You're too perfect. That's the problem. You're too good to be true, and I keep waiting for the mask to slip. There's no mask, Briar said, frustration creeping into his voice. This is who I am. What do I have to do to prove that? I don't know, Gina admitted. Maybe you can't. Maybe I'm too broken to trust anyone. The statement hung between them, heavy with implication. You're not broken, Briar said quietly. You're careful. There's a difference. Careful people don't fall in love with men who show up out of nowhere and insert themselves into their lives, Gina said. Then it's a good thing you're not that careful, Briar said with a sad smile. The conversation ended without resolution. Briar left that night to go back to his own place. The first time in weeks he hadn't stayed over. Gina told herself it was for the best, that distance would help, that she needed space to think, but the apartment felt empty without him, and the babies kept looking toward the door as if waiting for him to return. 3 days later, Landry showed up again. He's moving, Landry said without preamble. Gina's heart stopped. What? Briar, he's selling his penthouse. He's stepping back from the company, making me CEO. He's moving to Southridge. Gina stared at him. That's ridiculous. He can't. He's doing it anyway, Landry said. Says he doesn't want you to think he's slumming it or playing at normal life. Says he wants to live in the same world you do. He's found an apartment 2 blocks from here, modest, normal. He's giving up everything, Gina, not because you asked him to, but because he wants you to believe he's serious. That's insane, Gina whispered. He doesn't have to prove anything. Apparently he does, Landry said, because you can't believe someone could choose you without it being temporary. The accusation stung because it was true. He's making a mistake, Gina said. Maybe, Landry agreed. Or maybe he's finally doing something that actually matters. I've known Briar for years, Gina. I've never seen him this alive, this present, this happy. Whatever you think you're protecting him from by pushing him away, you're wrong. You're not a burden. You're the reason he finally understands what he was missing. After Landry left, Gina sat on her couch with her head in her hands. The babies were at daycare, and the apartment was quiet, too quiet. She thought about Briar selling his penthouse, giving up his company, moving to Southridge to prove he wasn't temporary. It was the grandest gesture she could imagine. And it terrified her, because if he did all that and still left, if he still decided she wasn't worth it, it would destroy her completely. But maybe that was the point. Maybe love required risk. Maybe trusting someone meant accepting that you could get hurt, but choosing to believe anyway. That evening, Gina went to the address Landry had given her, Briar's new apartment. It was modest, like Landry had said. A simple building with plain walls and worn carpet in the hallways. Nothing like the luxury penthouse he'd left behind. Briar opened the door, looking surprised and hopeful. Gina, you're really doing this? She asked. Giving up everything? I'm not giving up anything that matters, Briar said. I'm gaining everything that does. What if I can't? Gina started, her voice breaking. What if I can't let go of being scared? What if I spend our whole relationship waiting for you to leave? Then I'll spend our whole relationship proving you wrong, Briar said simply. I don't need you to stop being scared, Gina. I just need you to let me in anyway. Gina looked at him, at this man who'd literally rearranged his entire life to be closer to her, who'd proven again and again that he wasn't going anywhere, who loved her daughters like they were his own. I don't deserve you, she whispered. You deserve everything, Briar corrected. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you. The girls, Gina said suddenly, they've been asking for you. Mirabelle keeps pointing at your spot on the couch. Annabelle cries when you're not at bath time. And Isabel, she smiled for the first time yesterday, and you weren't there to see it. I'm sorry, Briar said, anguish crossing his face. Don't be sorry, Gina said. Just come back, come home, because apparently that apartment isn't home anymore. You are. Briar closed the distance between them and kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you, he said. You and those 3 amazing little girls. And I'm going to keep saying it until you believe me. I'm starting to, Gina admitted. Finally, I'm starting to believe you. They went back to Gina's apartment together, picked up the triplets from daycare, and spent the evening as a family. And when Annabelle climbed into Briar's lap and called him Dada for the first time, not baby babble but an actual word, Gina saw the future finally clicking into place. It was messy and complicated and built on trauma and fear and hard-earned trust, but it was real, and it was theirs. Chapter 10. The Family That Chose Itself. The triplets were walking now, toddling really, with that drunken sailor gait that sent them careening into furniture. Annabelle was the boldest, attempting to run before she could properly walk. Mirabelle followed her sister everywhere, determined not to be left behind. And Isabel took her time, watching and learning before making her moves. They had distinct personalities now, distinct voices, distinct ways of loving and needing and existing in the world. And they had 2 parents who adored them completely. Dinner was spaghetti, simple, messy, perfect. Gina had tried to make it special, but with 3 toddlers, nothing stayed clean for long. Sauce ended up in hair, on walls, somehow on the ceiling. Briar had it smeared across his shirt from when Annabelle had enthusiastically grabbed his collar. This is chaos, Briar said, laughing as he tried to wipe Mirabelle's face while she squirmed away. This is family, Gina corrected, catching Isabel before she could dump her entire plate on the floor. Briar looked at her then, really looked at her, with an expression so full of love, it made Gina's chest ache. Marry me, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a declaration, a promise already made. Gina froze, her hand still steadying Isabel's plate. What? Marry me, Briar repeated, setting down the cloth he'd been using on Mirabelle. Not because you saved my life. Not because of the girls. Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend every ordinary day of my life with you. I want every messy dinner and every midnight feeding and every chaotic bath time. I want you, just you, forever. Tears welled in Gina's eyes. You're proposing while covered in spaghetti sauce. I'm proposing because this moment is perfect, Briar said. Because you're perfect. Because this life we've built is everything I never knew I needed. Annabelle chose that moment to toddle over to Briar and pull herself up using his leg. Dada, she declared proudly. Then Mirabelle joined her. Dada! And finally Isabel, always the most careful, walked over and wrapped her little arms around Briar's other leg. Daddy, she said clearly, the word perfect and complete. Gina's tears spilled over. The girls had been working up to it for weeks, but hearing all 3 of them say it at once felt like the universe itself was weighing in on Briar's proposal. Yes, Gina whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding was simple, held at the Southridge Community Center, where Briar had once defended her before the whole neighborhood. The room was decorated with flowers Patricia had helped arrange, and chairs were filled with people who actually mattered. Dale from the diner, Patricia from the daycare, neighbors who'd become friends. Landry, standing as Briar's best man. Opal Fentress was there too, smiling proudly from the third row. She'd continued her home visits for months after the custody battle, watching the family grow and thrive. Her final report had declared Gina an exemplary guardian and recommended permanent custody without further review. Gina wore a simple dress. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy. Briar wore a suit, but had abandoned the tie after Annabelle had grabbed it during photos. The triplets wore matching flower girl dresses and were being wrangled by Patricia, who'd volunteered for toddler duty. The ceremony was short and sweet. The officiant, an elderly woman named Marianne, who ran the community center, spoke about love that chooses itself, about families built from promises rather than blood, about the strength it takes to trust again after being broken. When she asked if anyone had anything to say, Briar stepped forward. "Everyone here knows that Gina saved my life," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "That night in the storm, she pulled me from a burning car and breathed life back into my lungs. She dragged me back from death." He paused, his eyes finding Gina's across the small space. "But what she really saved, what she truly rescued, was my soul. I was alive before I met her, but I wasn't living. I had everything and felt nothing. I was successful and empty. And then she showed me what real strength looks like, what real love looks like." His voice cracked with emotion. "It's not in boardrooms or bank accounts. It's in midnight feedings and broken cars that barely run. It's in sacrificing everything for 3 babies who weren't yours because you made a promise to a dying friend. It's in standing tall when the world whispers. It's in choosing to trust again when trust has only ever brought pain." Briar moved closer to Gina, and she could see tears shining in his eyes. "Gina, you saved my life that night in the storm, but more than that, you gave it meaning. You showed me what I was missing, what I'd been missing my entire life. And I promise you, for the rest of our lives together, I will spend every day trying to deserve the gift you've given me." The room was silent except for quiet sniffling from multiple guests. Gina stepped forward and took the microphone with shaking hands. "And you saved mine too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me from believing I had to do everything alone. You saved me from thinking love always comes with conditions. You saved me from drowning in fear and exhaustion. You saw me at my worst, covered in baby spit up, exhausted, barely holding it together, and you didn't run. You stayed. You fought. You proved that not all men are the same." She reached out and took his hand. "You showed me that accepting help isn't weakness, that trusting someone isn't foolish, that love can be real and unconditional and permanent. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. And you gave my daughters a father who chose them, which is the most powerful kind of love there is." Before either of them could say more, 3 little voices called out from where Patricia was trying to contain them. "Mama! Dada!" The triplets broke free from Patricia's grasp and ran, toddled, toward their parents. Annabelle reached them first, grabbing Gina's dress and Briar's legs simultaneously. Mirabelle crashed into them seconds later, giggling wildly. And Isabel walked carefully but purposefully, her little face serious and determined. Briar and Gina bent down and caught all 3 girls in their arms. The officiant, laughing through her own tears, declared them married, while the family stood in a messy, beautiful circle of arms and laughter and love. The crowd erupted in applause, but Gina barely heard it. She was focused on this moment, on Briar's arms around her, on her daughters' faces pressed against her, on the feeling of completeness that had eluded her for so long. "We're a family," she whispered. "We always were," Briar answered, kissing her forehead. "It just took us a while to see it." The celebration continued with cake and music and dancing. Briar danced with each of the triplets individually, spinning them until they shrieked with laughter. Gina danced with Dale and Landry and even Opal, who surprised everyone by being quite graceful. But the best moment came late in the evening, after most guests had left and the girls were getting drowsy. Briar and Gina stood in the doorway of the community center's small nursery, watching Annabelle, Mirabelle, and Isabel sleep peacefully in their makeshift beds. "I never thought I'd have this," Gina admitted quietly. "A family, real love, a partner who stays." "I never thought I'd find someone who made me want to be better," Briar said. "Someone who showed me what really matters." They stood in silence for a moment, watching their daughter's dream. "Thank you," Gina said, "for not giving up on me when I tried to push you away, for proving that some people keep their promises. Thank you for saving my life," Briar countered, "and then giving me a reason to live it." Later that night, back in their apartment, Briar had officially moved in weeks ago. They tucked the girls into their beds and stood in the doorway together, hands linked. "We're a family," Gina whispered again, still marveling at the reality of it. Briar pulled her close and answered, "We always were. It just took us a while to see it." And in that small apartment in Southridge, surrounded by love that was chosen rather than given, built from promises and sacrifice and hard-earned trust, they finally beautifully came home, not to a place, but to each other, to three little girls who'd lost their biological mother, but gained two parents who would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. To a family that had been forged in fire and rain and midnight feedings and courtroom battles and midnight bottles. A family that proved love isn't about biology or money or perfection. It's about showing up, about staying, about choosing each other every single day, even when, especially when, it's hard. As Gina fell asleep that night with Briar's arms around her and the sound of her daughter's breathing in the next room, she thought about the woman she'd been that stormy night, driving home exhausted, not knowing her life was about to shatter and rebuild itself into something better. That woman had saved a stranger's life without expecting anything in return, and in doing so, she'd saved her own. Sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us back. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into, but something you build, from promises and love and sheer stubborn determination. And sometimes, just sometimes, the storm that seems like an ending is actually a beginning, the end.